Hello, guys. Today I will be reading you guys the fifth chapter of Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. I had weird dreams full of barnyard animals. Most of them wanted to kill me, the rest wanted food. I must have woken up several times, but what I had heard and saw made no sense, so I just passed out again. I remember lying in a soft bed, being spoon fed something that tastes like butter popcorn, only it was pudding. The girl with curly blonde hair hovered over me, smirking as she scraped drips off my chin with a spoon. When she saw my eyes open, she asked, "What will happen at the summer solstice?" I managed to croak, "What?" She looked around as if afraid someone would overhear. "What's going on? What was stolen? We've only got a few weeks." "I'm sorry," I mumbled. "I don't." Somebody knocked on the door, and the girl quickly filled my mouth with pudding. The next time I woke up, the girl was gone. A husky blond dude, like a surfer, stood in the corner of the bedroom, keeping watch over me. He had blue eyes, at least a dozen of them, on his cheeks, his forehead, the backs of his hands. When I finally came around for good, there was nothing weird about my surroundings, except they were nicer than I was used to. I was sitting in a deck chair on a huge porch, grazing across a meadow at green hills in the distance. The breeze smelled like strawberries. There was a blanket over my legs, a pillow behind my neck. All that was great, but my mouth felt like a scorpion had been using it for a nest. My tongue was dry and nasty, and every one of my teeth hurt. On the table next to me was a tall drink. It looked like iced apple juice, with the green straw and a paper parasol stuck through a maraschino cherry. My hand was so weak, I almost dropped the glass once I got my fingers around it. "Careful," a familiar voice said. Grover was leaning against the porch railing, looking like he hadn't slept in a week. Under one arm, he cradled a shoebox. He was wearing blue jeans, Converse high tops, and a bright orange t-shirt that said "Can't Have Blood." Just plain old Grover, not the goat boy. So maybe I had a nightmare. Maybe my mom was okay. We were still on vacation, and we stopped here at this big house for some reason. And you saved my life, Grover said. Well, the least I can do. I went back to the hill. I thought you might want this. Reverently, he placed the shoebox in my lap. Inside was a black and white bull's horn, the base jagged from being broken off, the tip splattered with dried blood. It hadn't been a nightmare. The Minotaur said, Um, Percy, it isn't a good idea. That's what they call it in the Greek myths, isn't it? The Minotaur, half man, half bull. Grover shifted comfortably. You've been out for 2 days. How much do you remember? My mom. Is she really? He looked down. I stared across the meadow. There were groves of trees, a winding stream, acres of strawberries spread out under the blue sky. The valley was surrounded by rolling hills, and the tallest one, directly in front of us, was the one with the huge pine tree on top. Even that looked beautiful in the sunlight. My mother was gone. The whole world should be black and cold. Nothing should look beautiful. I'm sorry, Grover sniffled. I'm a failure. I'm I'm the worst satyr in the world, he moaned, stomping his foot so hard it came off. I mean, the Converse high top came off. The inside was filled with styrofoam, except for a hoof-shaped hole. "Oh, sticks," he mumbled. Thunder rolled across the clear sky. As he struggled to get his hoof back in the fake foot, I thought, well, that settles it. Grover was a satyr. I was ready to bet that if I shaved his curly brown hair, I'd even find tiny horns on his head. But I was too miserable to care that satyrs exist, or even minotaurs. All that meant was my mom had really been squeezed into nothingness, dissolved into yellow light. I was alone, an orphan. I'd have to live with smelly Gabe? No, that would never happen. I would live on the streets first. I would pretend I was 17 to join the army. I'd do something. Grover was still sniffling. Poor kid, poor goat, sad or whatever, looked as if he expected to be hit. I said, "It wasn't your fault." "Yes, it was. I was supposed to protect you." "Did my mother ask you to protect me?" "No, but that's my job. I'm a keeper. At least I was." "Don't strain yourself," Grover said. "Here." He helped me hold my glass and put the straw to my lips. I recoiled at the taste because I was expecting apple juice. It wasn't that at all. It was chocolate chip cookies, liquid cookies, not just any cookies. My mom's homemade blue chocolate chip cookies, buttery and hot, with the chips still melting. Drinking it, my whole body felt warm and good, full of energy. My grief didn't go away, but I felt as if my mom had just brushed her hand against my cheek, giving me a cookie the way she used to when I was small, and told me everything was going to be okay. Before I knew it, I drained the glass. I stared into it. Sure, I just had a warm drink, but the ice cube hadn't even melted. "Was it good?" Grover asked. I nodded. "What did it taste like?" He sounded so wistful, I felt guilty. "Sorry," I said. "I should have let you taste." His eyes got wide. "No, that's not what I meant. I just wondered." "Chocolate chip cookies," I said. "My mom's homemade." He sighed. "And how do you feel?" "Like I could throw Nancy Boba Fett 100 meters." "That's good," he said. "That's good. I don't think you should risk drinking any more of that stuff." "What do you mean?" He took the empty glass from me gingerly, as if it were dynamite, and set it back on the table. "Come on. Kyron and Mr. D are waiting." The porch wrapped all the way around the farmhouse. My legs felt wobbly trying to walk that far. Grover offered to carry the Minotaur horn, but I held on to it. I'd paid for that souvenir the hard way, and I wasn't going to let it go. As we came around the opposite end of the house, I caught my breath. We must have been on the North Shore of Long Island, because on this side of the house, the valley marched all the way up to Long Island Sound, which glittered about a mile in the distance. Between here and there, I simply couldn't process everything I was seeing. The landscape was dotted with buildings that looked like ancient Greek architecture. An open-air pavilion in amphitheater, a circular arena, except they all looked brand new. The white marble columns sparkling in the sun. In a nearby sandpit, a dozen high school-aged kids in satyrs played volleyball. Canoes glided across the small lake. Kids in bright orange t-shirts were like Grovers were chasing around each other and around a cluster of cabins nestled in the woods. Some shot targets at an archery range. Others rode horses down a wooded trail. And unless I was hallucinating, some of their horses had wings. Down at the end of the porch, two men sat across from each other at a card. The man facing me was small but porky. He had a red nose, big watery eyes, and curly hair so black it was almost purple. He looked like those paintings of baby angels. What do you call them? Hubbubs? No, cherubs. That's it. He looked like a cherub who turned middle age into a trailer park. He wore a tiger pattern Hawaiian shirt. It would have fit right in at one of Gabe's poker parties, except I got the feeling this guy could have out gambled even my stepfather. "That's Mr. D. Grover," m- m- murmured to me. "He's the camp director. Be polite. The girl, that's Annabeth Chase. She's just a camper, but she's been here longer than just about anybody. And you know Kyron." He pointed at the guy whose back was to me. First, I realized he was sitting in the wheelchair. Then I recognized the tweed jacket, the thinning brown hair, the scraggly beard. "Mr. Brunner!" I cried. The Latin teacher turned and smiled to me. His eyes had the mischievous glint they sometimes got in the class when he pulled a pop quiz and made all the multiple choice answers beat. "Ah, good Percy," he said. "Now we have four for Pinochle." He offered me the chair to the right of Mr. D, who looked at me with bloodshot eyes and heaved a great sigh. "Oh, I suppose I might say it. Welcome to Great Camp Half-Blood. There. Don't expect me to be glad to see you. Uh, thanks. I scooted little further away from him because there's one thing I learned from living with Gabe. It was how to tell when an adult had been hitting the happy juice. If Mr. D was a stranger to alcohol, I was sadder. Annabeth, Mr. Brunner called to the blonde girl. She came forward, and Mr. Brunner introduced us. This young lady nursed you back to health, Percy. Annabeth, my dear, why don't you go check on Percy's bunk? We'll be putting him in cabin 11 for now. And just said, sure, Kyron. She was probably my age, maybe a couple of centimeters taller, and a whole lot more athletic looking. With her deep tan and curly blonde hair, she was almost exactly what I thought of a stereotypical Californian girl would look like, except her eyes ruined the image. They were startling gray like storm clouds, pretty but intimidating, as if she were analyzing the best way to take me down in a fight. He glanced and the minotaur in my hand that back at me. I imagined she was going to say, "You killed a minotaur, wow, you're so awesome," or something like that. Instead, she said, "You drool when you sleep." Then she sprinted down the lawn, her blonde hair flying behind her. "So," I said, anxious to change the subject, "you work here, Mr. Brunner?" "Not Mr. Brunner," the ex-Mr. Brunner said. "I'm afraid that was a pseudonym. You may call me Kyron." "Okay." Totally confused, I looked at the director and Mr. D. "Does that stand for something?" Mr. D stopped shuffling the cards. He looked at me like he just belched loudly. "Young man, names are powerful things. You don't just go around using them for no reason." "Oh, right. Sorry." "I must say, Percy," Kyron Brunner broke in, "I'm glad to see you alive. It's been a long time since I made a house call to a potential candidate. I hate to think I'm wasting my time." "House call?" "My year at ENC Academy to instruct you. We have satyrs at most school, of course, keeping a lookout. But Grover alerted me as soon as he met you. He sensed you were something special. So I decided to come upstate. I convinced the other Latin teacher to take a leave of absence. I tried to remember the beginning of the school year. It seemed like so long ago, but I did have a fuzzy memory of there being another Latin teacher my first week at ENC. Then, without explanation, he had disappeared and Mr. Brunner had taken the class. "You came to Yancey just to teach me?" I asked. Kyra nodded. "Honestly, I wasn't sure about you at first. We contacted your mother, let her know we were keeping an eye on you in case you were ready for Camp Half-Blood, but you still had so much to learn. Nevertheless, you made it here alive, and that's always the first step." "Grover," Mr. D said impatiently, "are you playing or not?" "Yes, sir," Grover troubled as he took the fourth chair, though I didn't know why he sh- why he should be so afraid of a pudgy little man in a tiger print Hawaiian shirt. "You do know how to play pinochle," Mr. D eyed me suspiciously. "I'm afraid not," I said. "I'm afraid not, sir," he said. "Sir," I repeated. I was liking the camp director less and less. Well, he told me, "It is, along with gladiator fighting and Pac-Man, one of the greatest games ever invented by humans. I would expect all civilized young men to know the rules." "I'm sure the boy can learn," Chiron said. "Please," I said. "What is this place? What am I doing here, Mr. Brun? Chiron, why would you go to Yancey Academy just to teach me?" Mr. D snorted. I asked the same questions. The camp director dealt the cards. Grover flinched every time one landed in his pile. Chiron smiled at me sympathetically, the way he used to in Latin class, as if to let me know that no matter what my average was, I was his star student. He expected me to have the right answer. "Percy," he said, "did your mom tell you nothing?" She said, I remember her sad eyes looking over the sea. "She told me she was afraid to send me here, even though my father had wanted her to. She thought once I was here, I probably couldn't leave. She wanted to keep me close to her." "Typical," Mr. Bid said. "That's how they usually get killed. Young man, are you bidding or not?" "What?" I asked. He explained impatiently how you bid in Pinnacle, and so I did. "I'm afraid there's too much to tell," Kyron said. "I'm afraid our usual orientation film won't be sufficient. Orientation film, I asked. No, Chiron decided. Well, Percy, you know your friend Grover is a satyr, you know. You know, he pointed to the horn and shoebox. You have killed a minotaur. No small feat either, lad. What you may not know is that your great powers are at work in your life. Gods, the forces you call the Greek gods, are very much alive. I stared at the others around the table. I waited for someone to yell, not. But all I got was Mr. D yelling, "Oh, a royal mantis! Trick, trick!" He cackled as he tallied up his points. Mr. D, Grover asked timidly, "If you're not going to eat it, could I have your Diet Coke can?" All right. Grover built a huge jar of the empty aluminum can and chewed it mournfully. Wait, I told Kyron. You're telling me there's such thing as God? Well, no, Kyron said. God, capital G, God. That's a different matter altogether. We shan't deal with the metaphysical. Metaphysical, but you were just talking about gods, plural, as in great beings that control the forces of nature and human endeavors, the immortal gods of Olympus. That's a small matter. Smaller, yes, quite. The gods we discussed in Latin class. Zeus, I said, Hera, Apollo. You mean them. And there it was again. Distant thunder on a cloudless day. Young man, said Mr. D, I would really be less casual about throwing those names around if I were you. But they're stories, I said. They're myths to explain lightning and the seasons and stuff. They're what people believed before there was science. Science, Mr. D said. And tell me, Percy Jackson. I flinched when he said my real name, which I never told anybody. What would people think of your science 2,000 years from now, Mr. D continued? They would call it primitive mumbo jumbo. That's what. Oh, I love mortals. They have absolutely no sense of perspective. They think they've come so far. And have they, Chiron? Look at this boy and tell me. I wasn't liking Mr. D much, but there's something to tell me about the way he called me mortal, as if he wasn't. It was enough to put a lump in my throat. To suggest why Grover was dutifully minding his cars, chewing a soda can, and keep his mouth shut. Percy, Chiron said, you may choose to believe it or not, but the fact is that immortal means immortal. Can you imagine that for a moment? Never dying, never fading, existing just as you are for all time. I was about to answer at the top of my head that it sounded like a pretty good deal, but the tone of Chiron's voice made me hesitate. You mean whether people believed in you or not? I said. Exactly, Chiron said. If you are God, how would you like being called a myth, an old story, to explain lightning? What if I told you, Percy Jackson, that someday people will call you a myth, just created to explain how little boys can get over losing their mothers? My heart pounded. He was trying to make me angry for some reason, but I wasn't going to let him. I said, I wouldn't like it, but I don't believe in gods. Oh, you're better. Oh, you better, Mr. D murmured, before one of them incinerates you. Grover said, Please, sir, he just lost his mother. He's in shock. A lucky thing, too, Mr. D grumbled, playing card. Bad enough I'm confined to this miserable job, working with boys who don't even believe. He waved his hand, and a goblet appeared on the table, as if the sunlight had bent momentarily and woven the air into glass. The goblet filled itself with red wine. My jaw dropped, but Chiron hardly looked up. Mr. D, he warned, your restrictions. Mr. D looked at the wine in feigned surprise. Dear me, he looked at me, at the sky, and yelled, Old habits, sorry. More thunder. Mr. D waved his hand again, and the wineglass changed into a fresh can of Diet Coke. He sighed unhappily, popped the top of the soda, and went back to his card game. Chiron winked at me. Mr. D offended his father a while back, took a fancy to a wood nymph who had been declared off limits. A wood nymph, I repeated, still staring at the Diet Coke can like it was from outer space. Yes, Mr. D convinced. Father loves to punish me. The first time, prohibition. Ghastly. Absolutely horrid 10 years. The second time, well, she really was pretty and I couldn't stay away. The second time, he sent me here, Half-Blood Hill, summer camp for brats like you. Be a better influence, he told me. Work with youth rather than tearing them down. Ha! Absolutely unfair. Mr. D sounded about 6 years old, like a pouting little kid, and I stammered, Your father is the immortalis, Chiron, Mr. D said. I thought you taught this boy the basics. My father is Zeus, of course. I ran through D names through Greek mythology, wine, the skin of a tiger, the satyrs that also work here, the way Grover cringed, as if Mr. D were his master. Here, Dionysus, I said, the god of wine. Mr. D rolled his eyes. "Well, what do they say these days, Grover? Do the children say, well, duh? Yes, Mr. D. Then, well, duh, Percy Jackson. Do you think I was Aphrodite, perhaps? You're a god. Yes, child, a god. You. He turned to look at me straight on, and I saw a kind of purplish fire in his eyes, a hint that this whiny, plump little man was only showing me the tiniest bit of the true nature. I saw a vision of grapevines choking unbelievers to death, drunken warriors insane with battle lust, sailors screaming as their hands turned to flippers, their faces elongated into dolphin snouts. I knew that if I pushed him, Mr. D would show me worse things. He would plant a disease in my brain that would leave me wearing a straitjacket in a rubber room for the rest of my life. Would you like to test me, child? He said quietly. No, no, sir. The fire died a little. He turned back to his card game. I believe I win. Not quite, Mr. D, Chiron said. He set down the straight, tallied the points, and said, the game goes to me. I thought Mr. D was going to vaporize Chiron right out of his wheelchair, but he just sighed through his nose, as if he were used to being beaten by the Latin teacher. He got up, and Grover rose too. I'm tired, Mr. D said. I believe I'll take a nap before the sing-along tonight. But first, Grover said, we need to talk again about your less than perfect performance on this assignment. Grover's face beaded with sweat. Yes, sir. Mr. D turned to me. Cabin 11, Percy Jackson, and mind your manners. He swept into the farmhouse, following miserably. Will Grover be okay? I asked Chiron. Chiron nodded, though he looked a bit troubled. Old Dionysus isn't really mad. He just hates his job. He's been grounded, I guess you would say, and he can't stand waiting another century before he's allowed to go back to Olympus. Mount Olympus, I said. You're telling me there really is a place there, a palace there? Well, no. There's Mount Olympus in Greece. Then there's the home of the gods, the convergence point of their powers, which indeed used to be on Mount Olympus. It's still called Mount Olympus, out of respect to the old ways. But the palace moves, Percy, just as the gods do. You mean the Greek gods are here? Like in America? Well, certainly. The god moves with the heart of the West. The what? Come now, Percy. What you call Western civilization. Do you think it's just an abstract concept? No, it's a living force, a collective consciousness that has burned bright for thousands of years. The gods are part of it. You might even say they are the source of it, at least. They are tied so tightly to it that they couldn't possibly fade, not unless all of Western civilization were obliterated. The fire started in Greece. And as you well know, or I hope you know, since you passed my course, the heart of the fire moved to Rome, and so did the gods. Oh, different names perhaps. Jupiter for Zeus, Venus for Aphrodite, and so on, but the same forces, the same gods. And then they died. Died? No. Did the West die? No. The gods simply moved to Germany, to France, to Spain for a while. Wherever the flame was brightest, the gods were there. They spent several centuries in England. All you need to do is look at the architecture. People do not forget the gods. Every place they ruled for the last 3,000 years, you can see them in paintings, in statues, on the most important buildings, and yes, Percy. Of course, there are in your United States. Look at symbol, the eagle of Zeus. Look at the statue of Prometheus in Rockefeller Center. The Greek facades of your government buildings in Washington. I defy you to find any American city where the Olympians are not prominently displayed in multiple places. Like it or not, and believe me, plenty of people weren't fond of Rome either. America is not the heart of the flame, it is the great power of the West, and so Olympus is here, and we are here. It was all too much, especially the fact that I seemed to be included in Chiron's we, as if I were part of a club. Who are you, Chiron? Who am I? Chiron smiled. He shifted his weight as if he were going to get up out of his wheelchair, but I knew that was impossible. He was paralyzed from the waist down. Who are you? He mused. Well, that's the question we all wanted, isn't it? But for now, we should get you a bunk in cabin 11. There will be new friends to meet. Plenty of time for lessons tomorrow. Besides, there will be toasted marshmallows at the campfire tonight, and I simply adore them. And then he did rise from his wheelchair. But there was something odd about the way he did. His blanket fell away from his legs, but the legs didn't move. His waist kept getting longer, rising above his belt. At first, I thought he was wearing very long white velvet underwear. As he kept rising out of the chair, out taller than any man, I realized that the velvet underwear wasn't underwear. It was the front of an animal, muscle and sinew under coarse white fur. And the wheelchair wasn't a chair. It was some kind of container, an enormous box on wheels. Could have been magic, but there was no way it could have held all of him. A leg came out, long and not beneath, with a huge polished wolf. Then another front leg, then hindquarters, and then the box is empty. Nothing but a metal shell with a couple of fake humans attached. I stared at the horse, who had sprung from the wheelchair, a huge white stallion, but where his neck should be was the upper body of my Latin teacher, smoothly grafted to a horse trunk. What a relief, the centaur said. I'm cooped up in there for so long. My fetlocks have fallen asleep. Now, come, Percy Jackson. Let's meet the other campers. So that was chapter 5 of the book, the summary. After being nursed back to health, Percy enjoys the views of the camp, despite feeling remorse for what he assumed was his mother's death. He tries to remember the battle with the Bullman, which he now calls the Minotaur. Grover apologized to Percy for not being able to save Sally and for his failure in the role of a keeper. Percy does not blame Grover, though, and the two leave to the farmhouse and enter the main part of Camp Half-Blood. Percy meets Mr. D, the camp director. Chiron, who he knew as Mr. Brunner, and Annabeth, one of the daughters of Athena. He learned that Chiron has been at school to teach Percy after Grover suggested that Percy was special. Percy joined Chiron, Mr. D, and Grover in a game of Pinochle. While playing the game, they discussed the presence of Greek gods in the world and commented on how Mr. D is one of them, Dionysus, the god of wine. Mr. D and Grover lead so that Chiron and Percy can have a private conversation. Chiron and Percy discuss more about Mount Olympus and the Greek gods. Chiron tells Percy that he will learn more about himself and the role after he gets settled in the cabin. At this point, Percy sees Chiron as his true self, a centaur. Okay, today I have a few multiple choice questions for you. So here's the first one. What is strange about the man who guards Percy when he sleeps? He has a surfboard. He complains he is bored. He is covered in eyes. Or D, nothing is strange. So as again in last time, if you need more time, you can pause it. Question 2. What does Grover give Percy in the shoebox? A. A t-shirt. B. Magic shoe. C. The Minotaur's horn. Or D. He doesn't give him anything. Question 3. How does Percy feel as he tried the strange thing? A. Nauseous. B. Warm and fuzzy. C. Excited. D. Dizzy. 4. What clue helps Percy guess Mr. D's identity? He asks for a kingdom coat. B. He has red eyes and said his father is Zeus. C. Grover tells him. D. Percy just knew. Question 5. What was stolen at the summer solstice? A. A war helmet. B. A master bolt. A C. A trident. Or D. Throne. And here are the answers for the multiple choice. Again, if you need a pause it for more time, you can pause it. And that's all for today. Thank you.